Did you know in Iron Man, Obadiah Stane plays the piano about an hour into the film, and it foreshadows his relationship with Stark. The piece he plays is by Antonio Salieri, who's best known as the jealous rival of Wolfgang Mozart. Antonio was even thought to have murdered Mozart, but this was later rectified. The comparison serves as a parallel between Stark and Stane throughout this film and the backstory. Did you know in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, there's a reference to the basilisk being the big baddie early on, but it was cut from the film. About halfway through, Hagrid barges into Dumbledore's office, and he's carrying a dead rooster while he tries to defend Harry. This is actually a reference to facts that are explained in the book. Hagrid finds all of the roosters dead, and this is because the sound of a rooster is fatal to a basilisk. Did you know in The Mist, the original script included an opening scene that showed the military scientist that is referenced by Private Jessup as he accidentally opened up the dimension portal that brought the creatures and the mist into our world. During a dinner, Andre Braugher questioned the inclusion of this scene, and Frank eventually decided to scrap the scene and leave the nature of the mist more ambiguous. This idea was straight from the Stephen King novel, and it was also the inspiration for the video game Half-Life. In that game, scientists at a top-secret base open interdimensional portals, and they open the floodgates to hostile inhabitants. Did you know in Blonde, Ana de Armas put in a lot of work to perfect the voice and accent of Marilyn Monroe. She spent 9 months in training to keep her from sounding Cuban, but when the film was shown in test screenings in 2021, the audience members still complained about her accent. Director Andrew Dominic mentioned that they put work in during post-production to make her sound more American. Anna's casting made some American audience members outraged by her casting, but the cast and crew sided with Anna, stating that she was the perfect fit for the role. Anna isn't the only member of her family to work on the film either. Marilyn's dog in the film is actually Ana de Armas' dog, Elvis. Did you know in The Craft Legacy, they managed to put in multiple references to the original 1996 film? One of these comes in the form of an Easter egg that happens around 53 minutes in while Lily tries to show her photographs to Timmy. One of the photographs is actually the original cast going into Lorio's occult shop. It even shows the tile art of Our Lady of Guadalupe with the candles burning in front. Another reference happens when Tabby says the line, "We are the weirdos, mister." The interesting part is that the line is spoken by Lily in the trailer, and they changed it for the final cut. Did you know in Jigsaw, there are multiple clues that give away the twist ending? In the film, the games at the pig farm takes place in 2003, and this makes sense, since Anna, Mitch, Ryan, Carly, and Logan have no idea that Jigsaw is responsible for these games. In Saw 2 and Saw 5, participants of the game knew that Jigsaw was responsible due to his exposure on the news. When Anna and Ryan meet John, they don't acknowledge the fact that he should actually be dead, and this hints that the situation takes place prior to Saw 3, since John dies in that entry. Only 3 of the test subjects even have a connection to John as well. Anna was John's neighbor, Mitch sold John's nephew the faulty motorcycle, and Logan was the medical practitioner that wrongly labeled the image of John's tumor. Did you know in The Hateful Eight, Kurt Russell accidentally smashed an antique guitar? Daisy Doe Merg is playing the guitar before John the Hangman Ruth takes it from her and smashes it into a pillar, which garners a big reaction from Jennifer Jason Leigh. The reason for her big reaction wasn't good acting, but rather her genuine shock, as the guitar was a 145-year-old antique guitar that was worth $40,000 and was loaned to them by the Martin Guitar Museum. The plan was that there would be a cut after Jennifer had played guitar in order for them to switch to a replica before it was smashed. Seemingly, no one told Kurt Russell about the plan. Did you know in Zombieland Double Tap, there was originally supposed to be another type of zombie introduced that would complement the Homer zombie? When Tallahassee and Columbus go to the mall at the beginning of the movie, they run into a zombie that's attacking her own reflection. They had originally written this to be a Jessica variant that would refer to Jessica Simpson. The writers decided to write this out. Did you know in The Kingsman, The Secret Service? During the end of the film, there's a moment after Roxy destroys one of the satellites where Valentine calls someone else to ask to use their existing satellite. Valentine refers to him as E, and this is supposed to be Elon Musk. Referencing him here, they take it a step further to reference SpaceX, which is Elon's space company that plans to launch hundreds of satellites into space to provide the world with internet. Did you know in Looper, Joe was originally supposed to move to Paris when he got older, and this is why we see him trying to learn French in earlier scenes. Rian Johnson decided that they just didn't have it in the budget to actually shoot in Paris, and he tried to replace Paris with New Orleans. After rejecting that idea, the Chinese distributor for the film offered to add more to the budget to have them film in Shanghai. Johnson thought that this was a great solution since it solved the Paris problem, and he felt that Shanghai fit the future setting of the film better. Did you know in John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum, There's a scene where John finds himself in a room with different revolvers from the 19th century, and he starts to swap parts. As he does so, he listens to the cylinders as he spins them, and he cocks the hammer. This is actually a reference to a similar scene in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. In that film, Tuco assembles a revolver to his liking by swapping parts in a gunsmith shop. Did you know in Ghost in the Shell, the film's antagonist is Q's? And he's an amalgamation that brings together multiple elements from several villains in the franchise. He's comprised of the Laughing Man, who's a hacker from Ghost in the Shell standalone complex, the Puppet Master, who's a villain from the first Ghost in the Shell film, and Hideo Q's, who's a member of the Individual 11 from the Ghost in the Shell SAC second gig. Did you know in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, when Spider-Man swings away and webs Gwen's hands to the cop car, she yells Peter's name and covers her mouth? This was a genuine mistake by Emma Stone, and she was supposed to yell Spider-Man instead. She covered her mouth as a genuine reaction, but director Mark Webb decided to leave it in. He called it a happy accident, and it worked out well since Emma didn't break character. Did you know in Ready Player One, one of the biggest differences between the book and the film is the inclusion of I-Rock. He's a huge part of the film as he's a co-conspirator of Sorrento. But in the book, he's only mentioned twice. Once in H's private chat room, and then he's online bragging about how he knows Parzival and H. This brings him to IOI to the first key challenge. Other than these moments, he doesn't appear anywhere else in the book. Did you know in Divergent, there were quite a few scenes that were cut to keep the film with its PG-13 rating? For one, there was a sex scene filmed between Thor and Triss, but this would have immediately shot it up to a rated R rating. There's also a scene from the book where Edward is stabbed by a butter knife in the eye. In the book, Peter's the one to do it, and this scene was actually filmed. After deeming the scene to be too violent, they cut it to keep their rating. The crew decided that they would tone down all the visual violence, such as blood spatters, in favor of more emotional violence. Did you know in Thor, there's a hidden reference to a fellow Avenger? When Thor is attempting to recover Mjolnir, there's an agent that grabs a bow and arrow. They refer to him as Agent Barton, and this of course is Clint Barton. Later on, Clint is better known as Hawkeye, and he becomes a founding member of the Avengers with Thor. This is also the only time that Clint is shown as being right-handed or using a compound bow. There's also a reference to Bruce and Hank Pym. Around 47 minutes in, Selvig mentions a pioneer in gamma radiation that got mixed up with S.H.I.E.L.D., and this is obviously Bruce Banner. Did you know in The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey, the entire time where Bilbo and Gollum interact with each other was actually filmed in complete takes? Both actors had to perform the entire scene from start to finish, and it was filmed over the course of 2 weeks. The scene was shot towards the beginning of production, and Peter Jackson saw this as a way to help Martin Freeman settle into the role of Bilbo. The riddle competition was completely inspired by the Norse legend between a wise giantess and Odin. In that story, Odin wins the riddle competition by the same means as Bilbo, by asking a question that only he would know the answer to. Did you know in The Hunger Games: Catching Fire, things didn't go as planned from time to time? During the scene where Jenna Malone has to strip in the glass elevator, it turns out that the hotel wasn't closed for production. This meant that she only not stripped in front of Woody, Josh, and Jennifer, but any guests that happened to be looking in got a free show as well. She thought it was odd that they were doing this scene in the hotel instead of a soundstage, but she went with it anyway. When the elevator opened, a hotel employee was standing there, and Malone couldn't stay in character and started laughing. Also, during the scene where Katniss, Flynnick, and Peeta eat fish, they're actually eating raw fish. Jennifer had a difficult time with this, and the other two couldn't help but laugh about it. Did you know in Fury, Sergeant Collier's burn scars are never actually explained in the finished version of the film? Originally, the scene where Collier and Norman talk while they drive through a burning town was supposed to be much longer. In the original plans, Collier would have told Norman that he got the scars from a car accident that he was in as a younger man. He got into a drunken fight during the festival, and while he was driving back from the sheriff in his truck, he crashed it, and he ended up killing his younger brother and fiancé. The engine would have ended up on his back, and this is where his burns come from. Collier also would have revealed that the judge gave him the option of joining the army or jail, and this would be how he got into the army. Did you know in Saw 5, Scott Patterson's involvement with the film was questioned by people who originally thought that he wasn't available for filming? Most people assumed that his involvement was just a cameo, since the hype for the film had posters and trailers that showcased the water box trap. It was assumed that the character would die off at an early stage in the film, and Scott didn't even know the ending. The special effects technician ended up spoiling the ending for him when he came up to make casts of Scott's arms. Scott was really worried about performing the water box trap though, and it didn't help that earlier tests for the stunt didn't go well. It took multiple takes to perfect it since he kept getting uncomfortable at points and needed to reset.